The 22nd of January 1879 is etched into the annals of the British Army, a day which saw the first major encounter of the Anglo-Zulu War between the British Empire and the Zulu Kingdom. This is the Battle of Isandlwana. Sir Henry Bartle Frere, the High Commissioner for Southern Africa, on his own initiative and without the approval of the British government, instigated a war with the Zulus and had presented an impossible ultimatum to the Zulu King Cetshwayo on the 11th of December 1878. When the ultimatum expired a month later, Bartle Frere ordered Lord Chelmsford to proceed with an invasion of Zululand, for which plans had already been made. Lord Chelmsford, the Commander-in-Chief of the British forces during the war, initially planned a five-pronged invasion of Zululand, consisting of over 16,500 troops in 5 columns, and designed to encircle the Zulu army and force it to fight, as he was concerned that the Zulus would avoid battle. But deeming it unnecessary to have 5, Lord Chelmsford settled on 3 invading columns. The backbone of the British force under Lord Chelmsford consisted of 12 regular infantry companies, 6 each of the 1st and 2nd Battalions, 24th Regiment of Foot, which were hardened and reliable troops. In addition, there were approximately 2,500 local African auxiliaries of the Natal native contingent, many of whom were exiled or refugee Zulu. They were led by European officers, but were considered generally of poor quality by the British, as they were prohibited from using their traditional fighting technique, and inadequately trained in the European method, as well as being indifferently armed. Also, there were some irregular colonial cavalry units and a detachment of artillery, consisting of 6 field guns and several Cogner rockets. Adding on wagon drivers, camp followers and servants, there were around 4,700 men in the number 3 column and around 3,100 men in number 2 column that composed the main centre column. Colonel Anthony Durnford took charge of number 2 column with orders to stay on the defensive near the middle drift of the Tulanga River. Once he had established the camp at Isandlwana, Chelmsford sent out 2 battalions of the Natal native contingents to scout ahead. They skirmished with elements of a Zulu force which he believed to be the vanguard of the main Zulu army. Such was his confidence in British military training and firepower that he divided his force, departing the camp at dawn on January the 22nd with approximately 2,800 soldiers, including half of the British infantry contingent, together with around 600 auxiliaries, to find the main Zulu force with the intention of bringing them to battle, so as to achieve a decisive victory, and leaving the remaining 1,300 men of the number 3 column to guard the camp. Lieutenant Colonel Pauline, left in command of a rear position, was an administrator with no experience of frontline command on a campaign. Nevertheless, he commanded a strong force, particularly the 6 veteran regular infantry companies, which were experienced in colonial warfare. At around 10:30 am, Colonel Anthony Durnford arrived from Rorke's Drift with 500 men of the Natal native contingent and a rocket battery of number 2 column to reinforce the camp at Isandlwana. Chelmsford had underestimated the disciplined, well-led, well-motivated and confident Zulus. The failure to secure an effective defensive position, the poor intelligence on the location of the main Zulu army, Chelmsford's decision to split his force in half, and the Zulus' tactical exploitation of the terrain and the weaknesses in the British formation, all combined to prove catastrophic for the troops at Isandlwana. The Zulu army, commanded by Nipsingaweo, had outmanoeuvred Chelmsford and prepared themselves to attack. The main Zulu force was discovered at around 11 AM by men of Lieutenant Charles Raw's troop of scouts, who chased a number of Zulus into a valley, only then seeing most of the 20,000 men of the main enemy force sitting in total quiet. The Zulus quickly adopted their traditional pitched battle formation, known as the horns and chest of the buffalo, with the aim of encircling the British position. From Pauline's vantage point in the camp, at first only the right horn and then the chest of the attack seemed to be developing. Pauline sent out first one, then all 6 companies of the 24th Foot into an extended firing line, with the aim of meeting the Zulu attack head-on and checking it with firepower. Durnford's men, upon meeting elements of the Zulu centre, had retreated to a dried-out watercourse on the British right flank, where they formed a defensive line. The rocket battery under Durnford's command, which was not mounted and dropped behind the rest of the force, was isolated and overrun very early in the engagement. The 2 battalions of Natal troops were in Durnford's line, while all their British officers and NCOs carried rifles. Only 1 in 10 of the Natal native contingent soldiers under their command had a firearm, and those few weapons were muzzle-loading muskets with limited ammunition. Many of the native troops began to leave the battlefield at this point. Pauline only made one change to the original disposition after about 20 minutes of firing, bringing in the companies in the firing line slightly closer to the camp. Until afternoon, the disciplined British volleys pinned down the Zulu centre, inflicting many casualties and causing the advance to stall. Indeed, morale remained high within the British line. The Martini Henry rifle was a powerful weapon, and the men were experienced. Additionally, the shell fire from the Royal Artillery forced some Zulu regiments to take cover behind the reverse slope of a hill. Nevertheless, the left horn of the Zulu advance was moving to outflank and envelop the British right. Durnford's men, who had been fighting the longest, began to withdraw, and their rate of fire diminished. Durnford's withdrawal exposed the right flank of the British regulars, which, with the general threat of the Zulu encirclement, caused Pauline to order a withdrawal back to camp. The regulars' retreat was performed with order and discipline, and the men of the 24th conducted a fighting withdrawal into the camp. Durnford's retreat, however, exposed the flank of G Company, which was overrun relatively quickly. An officer in advance of Chelmsford Force gave his eyewitness account of the final stage of the battle at about 3 PM. In a few seconds we distinctively saw the guns fired again, one after another, sharp. This was done several times, a pause, and then a flash. The sun was shining on the camp at the time, and then the camp looked dark, just as if a shadow had passed over it. The guns did not fire after that, and in a few minutes all the tents had disappeared. The same moment is described in a Zulu warrior's account. He said, "The sun turned black in the middle of the battle. We could still see it over us, or should have thought we had been fighting till evening. Then we got into the camp, and there was a great deal of smoke and firing. Afterwards the sun came out, bright again." When the ammunition had run out, surviving British soldiers had no choice but to fight on with bayonet and rifle butt. A Zulu account relates the single-handed fight by the guard of Chelmsford's tent. A big Irishman of the 24th who kept the Zulus back with his bayonet until he was speared and the General's Union flag captured. Both the colours of the 2nd 24th were lost, while the Queen's colour of the 1st 24th was carried off the field by Lieutenant Melville on horseback, but lost when he crossed the river, despite Lieutenant Coghill having come to his aid. Both Melville and Coghill were killed after crossing the river, and later received Victoria Crosses in 1907. The presence of large numbers of bodies grouped together suggests the resistance was more protracted than originally thought, and a number of desperate last stands were made. Evidence shows that many of the bodies, today marked by cairns, were found in several large groups around the camp, including one stand of around 150 men. A Zulu account describes a group of the 24 forming square on the neck of Isandlwana. Colonial cavalry, the NMP and the carbiners, who could easily have fled as they had horses, died around Durnford in his last stand, while nearby their horses were found dead on the picket road. What is clear is that the slaughter was complete in the area around the camp and back to Natal along the fugitives' drift. The fighting had been hand-to-hand combat and no quarter was given to the British regulars. The Zulus had been commanded to ignore the civilians in black coats, and this meant that some officers, whose patrol dress was dark blue and black at the time, were spared and escaped. The Zulus had a vast disadvantage in weapons technology, but they greatly outnumbered the British and ultimately overwhelmed them, killing over 1,300 troops, including all those out on the forward firing line. The Zulu army suffered anywhere between 1,000 to 3,000 killed. The Battle of Isandlwana was a decisive victory for the Zulus and caused the defeat of the first British invasion of Zululand. The British army had suffered its worst defeat against an indigenous foe equipped with vastly inferior military technology. Isandlwana resulted in the British taking a much more aggressive approach in the Zulu War, leading to a heavily reinforced second invasion and the destruction of King Ketshwayo's hope of a negotiated peace.